Hey,
Well,
YouTube.
hello.
We are here back for Memory Jogger 21. We're going to be talking about it's kind of gone back and forth just into tonight's notes.
Right.
Basically, talking about our early television slash cable TV watching. Since we were, especially if you were in our age range, mid 40s, we, we really watched or got ushered into the cable TV realm. We were the ones that watched aerial TV for at least a few years.
That's right. Yeah, we. It was unique too. Our setup in central Pennsylvania, where we got some of the New York and New Jersey channels that were essentially extended cable. But yeah, I mean the '80s was the boom of cable. You think of MTV that came around in I think '81, and
Yep.
then a lot of those other cable channels, the news channels, even like the Weather Channel, Golf Channel, those all
Hmm.
started in the '80s, and uh, we were kind of the guinea pigs for that era of cable. And as we'll get into tonight, we'll talk about some of our favorite stations and even our time kind of leading into getting cable, which we were both, I think, pretty much early adapters
Yeah.
to cable. Um, yeah, it's gonna be fun, man. It's gonna be fun talking TV, and yeah, we decided, we in the last episode we usually tease what we're doing next. We said maybe the movie lines, but we're trying to get our minds around how to best present that. So
Yeah.
we're gonna need a little more time on that. We'll figure it out, but in the meantime, this is easy stuff to talk about right here. What shows we used to watch and cable
Right.
channels and all that, and our setups.
Right.
So
And like Jason said, I thought it would be a little bit easier with the lines, but, you know, we go back and forth. Some of us, even the listener and watcher, you go back and forth and you can, just wrap off lines left and right. But it's usually in a setup or a scenario when it comes to mind.
yeah,
And initially, my thought was just, hey, we do this line, we do that line, we do this line. Well, then that didn't sound as entertaining. Or at least it
yeah,
sounded more entertaining when I put the thought into it. The initial thought, I thought, well, this would be cool. We'll do, you know, anybody got a dime? That we come off with something like that. But it's not as funny if you're not sitting there in a conversation where someone says, here's a quarter, and someone spouts out, well, call someone who cares. Things that were in mainstay conversation that we just boom, boom,
yeah,
boom, launch them. So we'll just have to get back to it. So
yeah,
you guys
yeah.
got surprised as much as we did.
Right, right. Yeah, and another surprise is too. Obviously, we're not using our video feeds tonight. I've been under the weather a little bit and actually have pink eye, which is not fun. So I figured instead of staring at my red eye, we just go audio tonight and uh, actually enjoying the comfort of my back porch and my earbuds. So I don't have my regular microphone and everything set up tonight. So maybe a little bit different sounding than normal, but where you can still uh, hopefully tell what we're saying,
Yeah.
and even in my mixed northern and southern accent, more southern, I guess, now than northern, but we'll get through it tonight and get you guys a fun episode. So, are you ready to go there, sir?
We are ready.
All right. Well, let's get into Memory Jogger. Welcome to another episode of Memory Jogger on the Rediscover the 80s podcast. Thanks everyone for listening as we jog our memories and run down our childhood dreams from the 80s and early 90s. I'm one of your hosts, Jason, on the VHF dial, and over on the UHF dial is my fellow host, Wyatt. How are you doing?
Good. How are you? Man, I remember that movie too, the UHF. It's been a long time. I know it came back out on Tubi,
Yep.
and I missed it. I didn't realize it was on there until it was gone. I
Yeah.
saw it and I'm like, I got to mark it. I got to watch it. And then it was on the see you later list. I'm like, oh crap, I missed it. So
Yeah. I have done a few watch parties over on Facebook and actually found UHF and I found the early 90s movie Airheads. You remember
Oh,
Airheads?
yes.
I did a back-to-back one Saturday night over there on Facebook, and so I've watched it within the last, I don't know, probably 4 months. And yeah, it's not
Wait,
one that I had watched a lot of over the years, huh?
you dropped out. You said you watched it and then for over four, and you dropped out.
Oh, okay. Uh, so I've watched it in the last 4 months or so, but UHF is not one that I've watched a lot of over the years, and it was fun kind of rediscovering that one and all of the different little situations there that Weird Al is in, and characters that he came up with, almost like a take on Ernest. Like we just
Hmm.
got done watching Ernest, but he's Rambo in that one, and he's Conan the librarian, and all this other stuff in UHF, and early Kramer, Michael Richards' role there too, which was fun as the janitor. Can't remember his
Yeah.
name off the top of my head now, but that's a fun movie, and I love Airheads just because of the radio background that we have, and being in a radio station setting for most of the movie there, held hostage by
Right.
those three guys.
I
It was fun.
I remember that movie very vaguely, and it was way back when before we even thought we were in radio. So I
Yeah.
don't make the connection. I'm gonna have to rewatch that. Another one I want to watch. I realize it's dated. Is WKRP,
Oh yeah,
as
yeah.
well
That's
as what's the more recent one that what's his name was on, um, based out of Seattle, I think. Um,
oh Frasier.
yeah, Frasier. I
Yeah,
want to watch
Frasier.
that just because of the radio again, the radio
Yeah.
background. But I've heard it's funny because I get on. Sorry guys, we're on a tangent. Um, we get on this. I get on this AM radio and broadcasting groups. One of the two was really commenting on WKRP, saying, "Oh,
Yeah.
hey, you see this?" I can't remember what the console was, the broadcast console was.
Uh
They're like, "It's so funny to see it, and it's not even hooked up."
huh.
It's people. We broadcasters would pick that up, especially the engineering. Like me, I would pick it up probably more often. So
Yeah.
now I'm intrigued. I want to go watch it just to see what's not really legit hooked up, to see
Right.
if the
Yeah.
cart machines are even wired up, that kind of thing.
Yeah. There's a couple shows like that. WKRP is one I'd love to go back and watch just for the aesthetics of radio. There's another show called News Radio. I think was in the early '90s, and Phil Hartman.
Oh yeah,
Trying to think who else was in that show. I think that was more or less based around a radio station and everything that goes on there.
Phil did an excellent job, but I think it was why he did the overacting on most of his voice, except for the captain, whatever he played on Pee Wee's Playhouse. Um,
Captain Carl. Yeah.
yeah, Captain Carl. But when he did it on The Simpsons, whenever it was
Yeah.
always, "Hey, how you doing there,
Yeah.
listeners?"
Kind of larger than life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. We'll have to go back and find some of those shows and check them out. But let's go ahead and move on with
Yes.
Memory Jogger. Just a quick reminder, you can interact with us in 3 different ways. Just, comment on our show notes over there at rediscoverthe80s.com. You can tweet us at RD80s and at InfamousWB, and you can also comment on our YouTube recording sessions if you want to leave some feedback about the show and any memories we might have jogged. We did have one piece of feedback to pass along. Our friend Gerospace over there on YouTube is always faithful to leave us a comment after each episode. He said on our episode 20 on retro gaming, "I'm a huge fan of retro games and systems. I still have my original NES, SNES, and Atari 2600. Did you guys hear about the relaunch of the Commodore 64 computer coming up in December?" Well, that was, of course, last year.
Yeah.
Been a while. Full-size remake of the original. "I never had a computer as a kid, so I can't wait for this. Great episode, guys." Unquote from Gerospace. I have seen it, and I was thinking that it was more of a shell of a Commodore 64, not necessarily a real working one. like the keyboard didn't work or anything, but like it was almost like a plug and play setup where you could play the old Commodore 64 games. But you'll have to get back to us, Space, if you ended up picking that up, and let us know what you think about it, because I did see it, but it just wasn't one that I had any really experience with over the years.
Well, there was. It's been a few years. There was like a website, Commodore something or C64.com, something like that. They were selling, and you could buy it. It was still pricey. But you could buy the Commodore 64, but it was in a new box. Maybe it was that Retro Games thing that did it. But nonetheless, it's been a little bit. It's not this December. Maybe they rebirthed it again to try to get some more people to buy it. But you could buy 3 different versions. One was like the legit, everything was original. It was just the keyboard. You hooked it up to a monitor and a power supply, and boom, it did its thing, but everything was internal, like the modern Atari or NES, whatever.
Gotcha.
But if you went more deluxe, you could get the Wi-Fi adapter or stuff inside it, but it still ran the Commodore 64 OS from way back in the day. So you Commodore lovers, you could go to town on this thing. I had 1 or 2 interactions with it, and perhaps it was because of the different machine language than what I was used to with the Texas Instruments. It was so cumbersome to try to understand. I'm like, yeah, screw it. And I just never could grasp it. But some guys, they love it over the Apple, or some other system.
Yeah. We had the Macintoshes at our school.
The Apple IIe's, yes. Where the keyboard was mounted right to the box.
That's right. Yep.
Then you had the TV that the monitor that sat kind of in a divot, I call it, a little indentation on top.
Yep.
And then your 5 1/4 disk drive on the side. And
the big old floppies back in the day. Yeah.
Yep. You had to flip it on. You remember there's some games that we had to use. It was, you have to start it and load it into RAM on one side, and it would tell you flip disk over to side 2.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh.
I can't remember. Was that the spelling game that did that?
The Snoopy one that dropped the letters?
Maybe I didn't remember that was
typing?
Snoopy. I just remember them dropping. You had to type. It was always funky, like
AJS
or something like that.
Yeah, it was a Snoopy one, and he would like drop letters, and Mr. States would be on us like a bat to not look down at the keyboard and just stare at the screen and make sure we're doing the game properly, which I never did.
Except during our study hall, because he'd be teaching while we could do that.
Right, yeah. That and Agent USA. Oh
and
my
paper
gosh.
Footballs.
Yeah.
Anyway,
the memory. Yeah.
Lots of
we did
blank
that
trails
episode
today.
already, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move along. The icebreaker here, we always do. You added this. I did see this. Was this yesterday? I think it was.
Yeah, yesterday we lost Brian Dennehy. I think I pronounced it right.
Yep.
He was best remembered. Most of us remember him more from Tommy Boy as the father. And then
Tom Callahan.
Yep. And then he played Rambo, First Blood. Jason, you would probably better know him from there than I would.
Yeah, Will Teasel. He was the sheriff that it was basically chased down Rambo in that movie, him and his deputies. I think that was probably his best role. If I had to rank them, would be the one in First Blood. He just played it so well. He's kind of the small town sheriff and doesn't want any trouble. And here comes Rambo, and doesn't really make trouble, but then he kind of assumes he's up to no good and starts this whole thing between them. And it's a great movie. I prefer actually Rambo 2 over the first one, but it's still very, very good. And he was great in that. I love him as Big Tom Callahan and Tommy Boy. Just watched that a few weeks ago. This is the 25th anniversary this year of that movie. Right? Um,
Like it's hard. I mean, we're old. I get that. We're getting up there, but it's still
yeah,
hard to believe. 25 years since Tommy Boy, man. I
yeah,
don't think I saw it in the theaters. I know I didn't see it in the theaters, but I saw it, probably at least as a rental.
yeah. That's what
Um,
I was thinking. I had saw it as well. It's such a great movie, and he played that part. If you're going to be Chris Farley's dad, you got to kind of be that rotund person. He was like the perfect build, and
yep, yep.
just his sense of humor was great. Wasn't in the movie actually terribly long,
No,
but made a huge impression, for the parts that he did have. So, yeah, that was a fun movie. One of the other movies I enjoy him in is Cocoon. Have you ever seen that? Back
I
in
was reading. I was trying to read up, but I did forgot to add that into our
he,
little notes. But he played in Cocoon. He's played one of the characters. Yes.
yeah, he was one of the main like alien characters. Want to say that came out around 86, I
It was
think.
it was in the midish 80s. Yes.
1985. Steve Guttenberg was in that. He plays kind of the main character in that, but uh, him and all of the old timers that find that pool that the like alien eggs are in, and
Yeah.
it's almost like a fountain of youth. Wilford Brimley and Don Amici, those guys in there, and it's just a fun movie. And his role isn't too huge in that, but he does have this one little scene where he kind of reveals that he's more than just human, and those aliens are kind of like glowing beings. And he pulls his his bottom eyelid down a little bit, and the light kind of shines through. It's almost like they're in a human skin. It left a lasting impression on me watching that movie as a probably teenager for the first time. But yeah, very. And he was more recently on the show Blacklist. I did not watch that. I've only actually seen one episode. It was over Christmas. We were down visiting my in-laws, and they were huge fans of the show. I was like, oh, Brian Dennehy's in this. Didn't realize he was still acting, and apparently there's still part of whatever season they're in now that he's still got another role coming up, or a scene or scenes
Right.
coming up. So they were a lot of people, actors and celebrities, were tweeting about him when they got the news. There's also one other passing. I think it was the same day, earlier that day, was the old WWF announcer Howard Finkel. Did you see that?
I saw him, but I couldn't place him as.
He was the ring announcer for the longest time. So all
Oh,
the
okay.
introductions coming to the ring, he was kind of balding on top, had the big
Yeah.
mustache, and had just that booming voice. I think he was from Jersey, and I think that kind of accent or inflection kind of came through when he would, announce. And then, when a belt would change hands, he would be, and the new champion,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, just an iconic voice for those of us growing up and watching wrestling. Was at pretty much every show doing the announcing. So well, I'm looking at it now. He was a ring announcer since 1977. Wow. So that
Yeah.
was, I don't know when they did put him in the Hall of Fame, the uh, WWE Hall of Fame,
Oh,
at
great.
some point. I'm not sure when he finally retired, but yeah, iconic voice and just tied to that WWF era for a long time. So that's our little icebreaker. Now, again, we kind of planned this to do the famous lines, but we'll keep moving forward. We're going to give you kind of our TV memories, our early TV memories, what it was like before cable almost even existed.
Yeah.
Man, we're old as dirt. Um, but there's transition period where we were just picking up TV over the air, only had a handful of channels, and then cable came along and almost, you know, more than doubled the channels we could get.
Exactly.
um, So just as a kind of a start in the podcast, what was your TV experience like before cable?
Well, I think the TV set had one of the one of the little, just I call them the telescoping
Uh-huh.
single aerial, where it kind of went back and forth, more like a looked more like a teacher's pointer than it did anything else. Not the rabbit
Right.
ears like you see two of. It was just the single one, and you had to move it just right to get the right
Yeah.
signal for whatever. I remember getting only three channels while we were there in Dorey Street and downtown Clearfield. So we only got PBS, NBC, and CBS. That's all we could pick up. And like Jeff Foxworthy would say, if the president was on, your night was shot because there
That's
was
right.
nothing else
Yeah.
on. How about you? What was your previous uh, pre-cable
Yeah.
TV experience?
Well, that was it. We had one TV in the living room,
Same here.
and it was, uh, I think the first one was actually just a 13-inch, and that was color, and it was the dial, so you got whatever the VHF was, 13 channels, I think, two through 13, I think maybe was the top dial.
VHF was yours lower, so 2 to 13, and then everything else was UHF.
Right. Um, so I remember that, and then I remember getting uh, I think it was a 19-inch color TV. It had a push button channel selector, and I got the 13-inch in my room. This was, gosh, this was later in the 80s when that happened. So yeah, we would have that out there hooked up, and some of my earlier memories was when I got my Atari 2600, which I think was probably around 83 or 84 when I got my 2600, and that was a big deal because you had those two prongs in the back that the
Yep.
Antenna was hooked to, and then when you got the 2600, I think you hooked those into the
Cable ready box
yeah
thing
yeah, and
adapter.
then put that into the TV with the Atari, and then I think you had a switch in the back that went from one to the other, so you had to move this black switch down or up to TV or to your Atari. I think that's how it went,
Yep.
or maybe that was the channel selector for channel three
No,
or channel.
no, that was how you did it because my Texas Instruments was the same way.
Okay,
And then on the very bottom of that modulator, that was where your channel 3 or 4 switch was on.
okay, okay. So yeah, we it was just that, and we were pretty early adapters. So I remember through the years when I didn't have like cable in my room, when for different moves and stuff, I would try to pick up local channels through the TV. But for the most part, uh, there was very few years that I remember that we didn't have cable. We were pretty early adapters. So, you know, those early 80s years, I was like 4, 5, 6 years old. And then 80, by 82 or 83, when we're, 7, 8 years old, is I remember having cable. Remember staying up late one night and watching like MTV music videos with my neighborhood friend Tim. So
Nice.
yeah, it was fairly early on.
Nice.
So like let's see. So I guess go into some of the.
I
I'm
just heard
sorry.
sound effects.
That was I forgot to silence my phone. Sorry about that, folks. As you're listening to our raw footage here. Um, what are some of the early shows, I guess, do you remember? You've got a few written down here, like local television shows.
Well, earliest things I remember, of course, the main ones, Dukes, Knight Rider, A-Team were all on about that time. Simon was around. Um, I think Silver Spoons was coming on board about that time frame. Of course, everything PBS, so 321 Contact,
Hmm.
Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers. But um, the two local productions, I'll call it, or two things I remember is our CBS was channel, we called it Channel 10 or TV 10,
Hmm.
and they would do an action news for kids on Saturdays. So it was, I think it was like teenagers, maybe
Uh-huh.
16, maybe 14-year-old, I don't know. But they would be the newscasters and so forth. I'm sure there was
Yeah.
adults behind the scenes working the cameras and boards and stuff, but it was, teenage kids running the news. And I thought that was kind of,
Yeah.
the news are, the stories weren't all that great, but it was still fascinating to see that, hey, they let kids run the joint. That's pretty cool. Um, and I
Right.
remember, this is a little bit later in life, but I remember that they are Channel 3, which was PBS, it was WPSX. And then they changed the call letters to WPSU because, well, my assertion is the broadcasting was conducted at Penn State University, which was in State College, the next county over. Whereas the TV transmitter, the transmitter tower, actually was on. It's actually sitting in Shawville, if you
Oh,
remember,
really?
Jason. The
Yeah.
tower. I didn't know that for years and years, and someone, my cousin or aunt or someone pointed out, says, "Oh, that's Channel Three's antenna up there." Like, really? That's where. That's why they say it's in Clearfield,
Yeah.
because it's
That's why we could come. That was like the clearest one, and we could
it,
pick up. Yeah.
it was. But that's. I mean, those are the closest things, you know, that we could pick up. We couldn't pick up ABC, which for us, unless it was the closest ABC at this era, was KDKA out of Pittsburgh.
That's right.
So unless I went to my grandparents, which I didn't know understand why, but my grandparents had a better antenna, I guess, and we could pick up ABC. So then I'd watch. It wasn't very often, but if I spent the night like on a weekend over at my grandparents, I was begging to watch Bugs Bunny and whatever else on ABC because that's where it was.
Right.
So but anyway, what about you? What was your TV shows like?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to think of local ones. It was more or less like you were saying. I do remember that Action News for Kids. I remember that chef that they had on there. What was his Mr. Food? Remember Mr.
Yes,
Food? I always thought he was like a local to Altoona, but I think
he
that
was
was like a syndicated show.
it was syndicated, but I never knew that
Uh,
for years until
Ooh, it's so good. That's
that's
what
it.
his catchphrase was. Yeah,
Yeah,
at the end of every
that's
show.
it.
But I remember catching that. I think it was at lunchtime, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It was right after the like at the very end, tail end of their new
the
news.
newscast. Yeah. So, and of course, I wasn't watching the news when I was at school, so it must have been on the weekends or at some other time. I don't know. I just found that fascinating. That was essentially my first introduction into like cooking shows. Was Mr. Food and Justin Wilson on. I think he was on PBS. The Cajun cook. You remember him? Onion. Let's put some onion in here.
I don't
Uh,
remember him.
you don't remember him? No, he was on PBS. So yeah, the local stuff I don't remember. Some of my earliest television watching memories was watching the A Team, and I can remember. I think A Team came out in '83, probably '83 or '84, when they started showing Riptide right after the A Team.
Yeah,
And I remember my bedtime. I could stay up and watch the A Team. I want to say it was like Tuesday night. Um,
it
it was
was.
it was on at 8 o'clock.
A
So
team was 8. I have the TV guide haphazardly picked up.
nice.
It
Okay.
was on at
So
8, and Riptide was at 9.
yeah. So I remember I was able to stay up and watch the A Team. It was my favorite show. And then at the end of the A Team, it was a Stephen J. Cannell production, and he had this little logo or sequence at the end where he flipped that page up from his typewriter
Yep.
for that, and it would come down. Yes. Once I saw that, and then every once in a while, I would get to the point where I could watch the intro to Riptide, which was that huge pink helicopter, and
That they always had to slap the dashboard to make it
you're
go.
right, yeah. I'd watch that, and then it was my bedtime, man. That was
I
one of
got to
my
watch a
earlier.
few episodes of that growing up. Not very often because that was, wasn't supposed to stay up late either. But
Uh,
every now and then, my dad would let me have I'll call it a wild night, which was just a late night,
yeah,
and I'd watch the Riptide for a while. I don't remember much except for that helicopter being, you had to smack it to start it. That's the only thing I remember really about that whole thing,
that
and the style of that helicopter.
yeah, it was just well, we were in that era of vehicles were part of the
Yeah,
shows anyway, so that was definitely what we gravitated to as kids. And that they had like that weird looking orange robot that almost looked like an alien on that show. I
I
remember
forgot
that
about
too.
that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, but anyway, yeah, that was I think one of my later nights because I had a specific show I wanted to watch. Otherwise, I was in bed probably by 8 or 8:30. So that was a huge deal back then. And then PBS, yeah, I mean, in the mornings I would watch. Well, probably not so much in the mornings when I lived in Kernsville and then commuted on the high school bus to Clearfield to go to school because I didn't have much time in the morning. I had to get to the bus stop and do that. But when in the afternoons, I remember like running home up the street after the bus dropped me off to get home to watch those cartoons in the afternoons, like GI Joe and Transformers and He Man, Thundercats. I think those were all kind of those time periods after school. And then there were several PBS shows too that I like to watch. Square One TV, they would show in the afternoons, and eventually Carmen San Diego. I remember watching that a lot. I think that was in the later '80s
probably.
uh, when that came on. But yeah, so that was kind of more my time that I could watch shows like right when I got home from school, and later on in the mornings I'd watch some stuff too. As I think we moved to Clearfield, but those were some early memories. So, do you remember the specific time when you got cable?
It was, I'll call it the early 80s. I want to say it was around the 82, maybe 83 era. It might have been just a year before, but wasn't too long. I was I want to say it was a couple years before the divorce. Divorce happened when I was 10, so
Uh,
that was in 86. So ballpark 83, 84, somewhere around there is when I remember getting it. How about you?
yeah, like I said, we were pretty early adapters, so it must have been in that time frame as well when it came to us, and we
And back
we didn't
then, you could
have.
hook the cable right straight to your stinking, TV, not have a cable box.
That's right. Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going. I was like, I don't remember having a cable box until it got to the point where they had more channels than what you could turn to on your TV. You know, it wasn't an issue when we got that push button because you could go up to whatever 99 channels if you wanted to, but it was hooked right into the TV, and we just pressed the buttons to get where we wanted to go. If like on my the 13-inch that I had in my room that I did get cable for, I was limited. Even I couldn't even use like the VHF dial on that one. I just remember getting the cable channels 2 through 13, which was still pretty cool for in your room. You could get all the Saturday morning cartoon channels and everything right there. But I didn't go up too far beyond that. If I went up too far, then I had to go out to the living room to watch my MTV and all that stuff. So let's go through now and talk about our experience with cable and I guess some of the channels and shows that we gravitated towards.
I was all over the place. It was kind of like just a circus delay of everything you wanted. You had Nickelodeon when that came on, like we've
Mhm.
indicated many times, and I think just a little bit ago, we had a New York TV station called WPIX, which most people, if you've heard of it, is more like a WGN or the TBS of the time, where it just broadcast
Yeah,
whatever TV show. Some of them only a few years old. It was kind of like um, Nick at Night before Nick at Night was.
Yeah,
They
it was
just
like there was like a handful of stations that what I would call super stations, and they even
yeah
call themselves super stations because they were picked up by cable, different cable networks, and were broadcast outside of what they could even broadcast to with their antennas. WPIX out of New York was one. WWOR in New Jersey was another one that we
yeah
got. WGN, like you indicated, and TBS. I think TBS was known for as the superstation for a
yes.
while, and I won't even say that WPIX maybe would call themselves the superstation for a while too. But
I don't think
yeah,
they were.
those
I never remember them being a superstation. I don't remember WGN ever being in our lineup. It might have been, but I don't remember it being there. I do remember
yeah
TBS. That was later on. Um, I think towards the time when we were getting ready to move out. I mean, to our adult
yeah I do remember
things.
TBS because they always had to start it at
Oh
the
five.
05 in the TV guide. So every time you look in the TV guide, it was 8:05 or 7:05 or whatever. And then if you're waiting for, I remember like watching wrestling, and there was they did movies and stuff. So if the Braves game, because they always broadcast the Braves and the Hawks, so if those games went long, then it kind of fed into other things that you were wanting to watch on the channel. And it was the same for WPIX too. They broadcasted the Yankees games,
Yep.
and WWOR did the Mets games. So I remember watching those too growing up. And we got the more regional teams as well. The Pirates were on KDKA, and Steelers were just wherever they were, on the
Right.
national schedule. But uh, yeah, those stations were just interesting because they kind of did their own thing. There wasn't a true primetime lineup like network
No.
channels, and just particularly speaking on WPIX, they had news broadcasts like the New York news that you could watch if you wanted to. I think I think they did 3 a day. But in the meantime, it was just wide open, and they would do movie marathons. They're the station that I watched Batman 66 in
Yep.
the afternoons. Um, they did even old reruns late at night, like the Honeymooners. That was a staple on that station
For
for the
years.
longest time. Um, the Honeymooners that would come on right after their local news at nighttime. I remember watching that. So they just did a lot of fun stuff on WPIX, and
They
a
also
lot of
had
shows that connected.
they had Crazy Eddie, the electronics guy.
Oh yes, the Crazy Eddie
Prices
commercials.
are insane.
Insane. Yeah.
They
Uh
also had what I remember is they had the DJ Cat show, which was just a puppet. The girl that played on it, I recognized her, and I can still never place her. I've seen her
huh.
elsewhere acting, um, but it was just a puppet, kind of like a take on Alf, I guess, in their own way. But they would throw mostly Woody Woodpecker cartoons in
Uh
the
huh.
mix, but he'd come back and do something, and his whole line was he couldn't use the C word, which is cute. So you can never call him cute. So who you call him cute? That was his thing. But I remember that, and like you said, the WPIX was just a mecca of everything. Like you said, Batman
Yeah.
'66. Man, I didn't realize how old that was until we started really digging. We're
Yeah.
watching it 20 years after the fact. We're like, what?
That's right. Yeah.
I thought
And
this was new.
that was uh that was primarily my first introduction to superheroes.
Yeah.
Uh that between that and the Superman movies with Christopher Reeve.
Yep.
Those were I never got into comic books as a kid, so that was how I was introduced to the that idea of superhero. And Saturday mornings too with Super Friends and the Hulk and some of those shows that they would do as cartoons. But live action, yeah, that was it, man. Um,
That's it.
that was some good stuff there. Uh, one other what was the other thing I was going to say about uh, PIX? Now it just escaped me. Um,
Well, that's where you saw your whatever Mr. Chicken, right? Your movie for
Ghost of Mr. Chicken.
yeah.
Yes, yes. That was through one of the. They did a, what was it called?
They did the Yule log in the winter in the Christmas time frame.
Well, that was another thing I was going to talk about too. But the WPIX used to do these horror movie marathons.
Yes.
It and Halloween time. Um, right. What was it called? I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, it was definitely, that was where I saw that movie. They would show classic movies, but they'd also show, kind of a few what were modern at the time movies. But it was known as like the movie station for a while too, if I do remember right, because it was, they would get their local news done, and in the afternoons and stuff, they start showing movies, and on the weekends,
Yep.
they'd always have movies going. And yeah, that's where the my love for the Yule log at Christmas started. That's a pretty interesting story that goes back into, I think, the 60s, when they first started broadcasting, and they essentially wanted their employees to be able to go home at night and spend Christmas Eve with their families. So they're like, well, let's just throw on this tape. And it was a 3-hour tape of, they just filmed a fireplace. I think it was at the governor's mansion in New York. It started out that way, and then they added that Christmas soundtrack to it to do the Christmas carols, so their people could be home at Christmas Eve. And then they, I think, started replaying it or doing it on Christmas morning as well, because I remember opening presents and wanting it to be on. So, like, in the background, we didn't have a fireplace in our house, so I don't know that. As I like to say, that warm cathode ray tube
Yeah.
heating up our living room to the tune of Christmas carols in the WPIX Yule log. It was a very fond memory.
That's it.
So that station, yeah, that holds a special place. Oh, and also the Thanksgiving, they would show March of the Wooden Soldiers with Laurel and Hardy. That was a tradition too on Thanksgiving Day. So that kind of kicked off the holiday season for me as well, watching that on WPIX, and I have to watch that once a year now too, just in that tradition. So, what are some other ones that you gravitated towards?
Well, aside from WPIX, I mean, Nickelodeon came online, so we had Pinwheel and um, geez, we just talked about him too here a few episodes ago. Mr. Wizard,
Oh yeah,
and those
he
guys.
Mr.
The
Wizard is on. Oh shoot, I just saw it. I think it might be Tubi. 6 seasons of Mr. Wizard just came up online. I just saw. I'll have to find it. Go ahead and keep going though.
well, I mean, you had them. You had your favorite. You can't do that on television. That was some of them in the game shows that came with Nickelodeon, like Double Dare and
Mm-hmm.
can't remember the house that you liked that wrecked the house.
Finders keepers.
Finders Keepers. But then you had and then this is where I don't know which channel hosted them, but you had Transformers and GI Joe and Mobile Armored Strike Command, Thundercats. I think Smurfs. I put it on our notes, but I think Smurfs was actually a Saturday morning thing.
Saturday
But
morning with Smurfs. Yep.
but you got all those channels. You're like, holy cow! There's so much more. Holy cow! What can we do? Um, and then this was all pre-divorce. I'm sorry, music videos for me were pretty much a no-no
Mm-hmm.
prior to the divorce. My dad was very strict about that, but post-divorce, my mom was a little bit more lenient. So we started to watch the MTV, and I got to see Martha Quinn and had a little crush on her, that
I
kind of
did
thing.
too. Yep.
Um, and we also could pick up ABC, which was
Right.
unheard of in town, at least where I was. So I could watch the awesomeness of ABC,
Uh huh.
the Bugs Bunny and whatever else was on Saturday morning cartoons. Um, I got to see My Two Dads wherever. I think that was an NBC thing, but that came out. Got to watch Benson. That was ABC. Um,
Mhm.
I could watch Airwolf. That was actually clear. Clearer.
Yeah, yeah,
The same with Knight Rider and Dukes. They were clearer. And obviously Fox later when it started to become something they could throw on the
right.
cables. But that was my big, huge, I guess, menu of shows. What about you?
Yeah, well, that was a big part of it, that you could get all of the major networks as clear as day. Where you'd have to adjust, get up, move your rabbit ears, and whatever. Back in the day when you got cable, then you got all the major networks that came in nice and clear. And like you said, Fox came in 88, maybe 87, somewhere in
But
that.
I think '87. That's when uh, Married with Children came
Children
out.
debuted. Yeah. But yeah, Nickelodeon was a big one. We actually did a memory jogger early on Nickelodeon. You can hear all of our favorites from that, and yeah, the game shows and all the fun little sketch shows that they had back then. And Mr. Wizard. Mr. Wizard is on Voodoo and Pluto TV right now, all five
Nice.
seasons for free. Um, just to follow up on that. But yeah, I mean, I remember watching a lot of USA Network too. USA ran the Cartoon Express back in the, I don't know, late. Well, it might have been kind of mid late '80s, and I think through the early '90s. I think that was maybe a morning thing and an afternoon thing. That's where we got our mask. I think that's where that showed on USA Network, and then in the afternoons, going back to our game shows episode, yeah, USA ran all those game show marathons in the afternoons. I was glued to USA Network, and they had shown a bunch of movies as well on the weekends and even throughout the week. Didn't really have too much original programming. It was mainly all syndicated stuff. Um, so that was a big network. And MTV, yeah, like I said, that was huge. That was one of the earlier memories I have of staying up late and watching music videos late. They were kind of taboo at the time, but they were also fresh and new to kids, and uh, that culture mainly, I think, is what that was more geared towards, because the kids listened to the loud music and the parents didn't want to hear it.
Right.
So that was even more of an enticement to watch MTV and to get to actually see your you know favorite artists, not necessarily live or in concert, but in a different setting. And a lot of those uh, music videos were almost like short films. Yeah, we could probably do a whole episode of Memory Jogger on our favorite
We
MTV
could, yeah.
videos. Just so many of them out there that were made a lasting impression, and the VJs, and yeah, I mean that was interesting to watch some of those old broadcasts, if you've ever done that on YouTube, to see how they programmed MTV back in the day, because it was essentially a radio station with visuals.
Yep. Yep.
Uh,
Which is what now radio stations are doing, so they can keep some attention to the to or listeners to the station.
right. Uh, but yeah, that was my world too. MTV, MTV, TBS, and eventually TNT when that came around, which I think that started in the '80s. That was a big one for me. I remember watching Pink Panther. They had like 30 minutes or an hour of Pink Panther in the morning, and I recorded a whole like 6-hour tape of. I love the Pink Panther. um, that was a huge deal. And then USA Network, Nickelodeon. I think those were the major cable channels I watched back in the day. Nickelodeon and Nick at Night, I'll throw in there too. We didn't
Yeah,
really talk
that came
too much
on.
about Nick at Night. I think we did some maybe in our Nickelodeon episode, but that's where we got all these old reruns too. Get Smart. I remember watching a lot of that. Green Acres and Mr. Ed and
My two
uh,
sons, my three,
my
whatever. My Three Sons.
My Three
I remember
Sons.
watching that. I don't know why, but I remember watching it, the Patty Duke Show,
I remember
uh,
being very
Monsters. Monsters was
oh
on there.
yes, yeah, the Munsters too. I remember watching that. There was a show called Lancelot Link's Secret Chimp. Do you remember that one? It was all these monkeys. It was a very short-lived show. I think in the maybe later '60s or early '70s that they would show late at night on Nick at Night. I'm like, what in the world is this? It's monkeys talking. So it was just all chimps that they had trained to do a television show, and then they added in a talk track to the show and got the monkeys to move their mouths. It was the most hilarious thing I had ever seen as a kid.
Well, they had
And
they also
being
had I Dream
being
of
late at
Jeannie.
night too.
Had I Dream
Yeah.
of Jeannie and all the classics that I didn't even know existed back in the day.
Oh yeah.
That was retro TV. And they didn't even call it retro TV back then. It was just now like more shows to watch to me. Just
Right.
out of
Yeah.
line.
Well, it was new to us. It was something to discover, and we're like, oh, this is still black and white too. It wasn't color.
And then they added AMC, and that's where we just kind of indulge ourselves when the Stooges they'd have those 6 hour or whatever
Oh
marathon,
yeah.
and it would
Yeah.
be the Curly marathons, and then it would be the Shemp marathons, or they'd be whatever. They just go, and we're like, this is just awesome.
Yeah. I was trying to think where we did watch our Stooges, if it was one of those cable channels or WPIX or something.
They probably had it too, but I think AMC was like the
Was
cornucopia.
it?
They just were like,
Oh
oh, you know
god.
what? Stooges are cheap. Oh, let's just play them for 6 hours and everybody take a lunch break.
Right. Yeah. That's pretty simple. But
It was
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. That was good. And then I guess finally, we were talking about kind of where we're at now with cable, and you still subscribe to cable, right?
Actually, just about 3 months ago, we were finally. Long story short, we got tired of paying. We were on the month-to-month plan, and every time I called to make a better deal, it was always more than what I was paying on the month-to-month plan. So I'm like, but you give new subscribers the better deal that's like half the price. So after lots of arguing with people on the little virtual chat windows, I finally like, you know what? Just cut my cable. I just want
Yeah.
the actual internet. That's it. That's all I want. And they're like, but I'm like, oh, I get irate when I get the sales. But the first time I hear, isn't that a great deal? Do you want me to just shoot you right now? Because right there, I don't want to. No, it's not a great deal because you just added that little line right there.
Yeah. Somebody
Um,
told me if you want to get your cable lowered, just call into the cancellation line. And like those people have more of an authority to work with your, whatever your cost is than just calling in to salesman or Joe Schmo or
well, I
whatever.
I used to play. Well, I used to play a game with them. I would find the CEO email, and I would send them and saying, "Look, this is what's happening. I can't get through to your regular sales department. Do you have better deals for existing customers so you don't lose me as a customer?" And I get shoved to like the top person, whatever, of
Mm-hmm.
sales or whatever. And for like 5 years, Comcast was very accommodating. They give me the best deal. And finally, I guess after 5 years, they're like, this guy gets us every year. Well, screw him. Well, okay, screw you too. You just got dropped. I'm going to Verizon. Um, so then I had, like I said, I had Fios for a couple years, 3 years. Yeah, 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
A lot better service than Xfinity. Xfinity was always dropping on us. Um,
Mm.
anyway, all that to say, we finally about 3 months ago dropped them. Um, got a little bit better, faster speed, but now we have no cable. But we have Hulu and Netflix and
Right. Yeah.
Amazon,
It's just a totally
Tubi, which
different.
is awesome. Um, all that. But my question was during our time in Pennsylvania.
Hmm.
Do you remember um, having to go back to antenna for any reason, or were you just straight?
No, it was much later when we got to the digital era, and we had, they made that switch in, what was that, like 2006 or 7 maybe. So about the time that they switched from the analog to digital. We actually dropped cable when we moved here, which was around that time. I think we moved here in 2006, and we have not been back to cable since. But I still have that kind of longing to have cable. It's weird. Like, so we got here, and they made the switch to digital. I remember having to get the digital antenna, and we were essentially back to where we were before we had cable in the early 80s. And here we got more channels, though, obviously. And when they went to the digital setup, then you had like
The sub
our
channels.
yeah, our local NBC channel was channel 12. Excuse me. So channel 12.1 was the regular channel. 12.2 was the retro TV network. And this was when Jackson, my oldest, was 4-ish, 4 or 5-ish. They at 7 o'clock they'd show Knight Rider. At 8 o'clock they showed the A Team.
Oh,
So
geez, nice.
we would eat dinner, and then we would go back in to watch the Black Car Show, is what he called it,
Yep, I remember that.
and then the Soldiers. And so I was like right back into all of those retro shows thanks to that channel, which I think it's since changed names and it's still around, but they don't show quite the lineup they used to. It's MeTV is more of like a retro TV network now, but yeah. So, but we were back to our basic network channels, but they had at least 2 other channels that were associated with that station. So we, instead of getting
3 or 4 channels,
back in the day, we got like, I don't know, counting the religious channels, like 20, you know,
right?
because there's always like 4 or 5 of those too that you can pick up. Um, but it's funny, like, so we've been streaming a good part of that time. We got Netflix, like just the discs through the mail. That was part of our supplemental TV watching when we first dropped cable. We would get the local channels over the air and then do the discs through the mail. And then in the last couple years, I've really grown to love Pluto TV. And I think one of the reasons was they don't anymore, but they had a more traditional cable style guide system, platform, whatever, interface, whatever you want to call it. And it looked like an old cable.
Yep.
You're scrolling through your cable channels. So I don't know. I just latched onto that. I was like, oh, this is cool. And then they just changed it a couple weeks ago, mainly, or maybe a month ago, and I was so mad. But that was just kind of, oh, I've got cable, but I don't,
That's it.
since we're streaming. But yeah, there's just still something about, uh, even in this era, I've still managed to, like I said, go back to that early 80s time with the Switch when we dropped cable. And then just with these new streaming platforms and the way they're set up, some of them are really close to what it was when we initially got cable and you went to like channel 2 or whatever it was to
Right.
watch your channels go by. And okay, I want to watch the Golden Girls. That looks good. And then you punch in your channel. But yeah, it's come full circle in many ways.
Well, for me, um, after moving out into the boonies, when my mom remarried, and then my dad carried cable for several years, and it was a different cable. Was um, slightly different. They were the one that had USA Network, but Clearfield didn't. Um, and they had a couple other different channels. But when I went to live out in the boonies with my stepdad in his house. He had aerial TV, so we are back on the antenna watching, yeah, 3, 6, and 10, which was PBS, NBC, and CBS respectively. And then we had a satellite TV. You had the 12-foot satellite dish out in the backyard. So we still had a pseudo cable in that we picked up. I don't think we picked up Nickelodeon, but we would pick up like MTV and CMT back in, well, TNN back in the day.
Yeah.
Um,
TNN showed monster trucks too. I remember watching that.
and all types of stuff like that. We had the Showtime, I think, package. So we had Showtime and some other movie channel with it. So we got to see some of that. So then I had to, well, Fox came online because that's how I was watching Married with Children. I had a little, that's when I got my 13-inch in the room, in my bedroom, was that way. And I'd have to, I had on his, the 13-inch that I was given had the circle loop for your UHF. I was twisting and adding aluminum foil out the window trying to pick up Fox. Just almost like the episode that they do. Assume Fox watching style positions. That's what he calls it.
Positions. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's how I watched it. It was, terribly snowy and whatever else, but I got it. The same way with the Viper when it came out in '92. It was terrible. I recorded it, but it was still terrible.
That was a cool thing too back in the day. Like, so when we got into the digital era, it just irked me to death when a station would not come in the digital era. It's just pixels, and it's frozen pixels. You can't see crap. Back in the day, when you had the antenna,
you at least got snow, or
yes, it was a little bit snowy, but you could still make out more of what's going on with a weaker signal.
Yep.
So that's a huge thing that just irked me when we got into the digital era. I was like, give me my rabbit ears back, man. I'm going back to analog just so I can see what I'm seeing with a little bit of snow and not just these pixel boxes every 5 seconds.
That's
and it. You can't see a thing.
This was also the time when I was 16. I bought that, maybe 17 is when it happened, but I bought that little 5-inch black and white AM/FM TV. And of course, now we have computer screens in our cars all day long, right? It's not illegal, but I thought TV screens were illegal back then. And this is, again, 92, 93, I don't know, that era. And so I don't get pulled over, or assumingly get pulled over for watching my TV. I point the TV towards the dashboard, but I have the antenna up and I'm listening to Married with Children as I'm going to the radio station for work. So I'm wanting to listen to my, whatever. But fast forward, you're talking about the digital switch. We had cable for the longest time. I did have digital TV, antenna TV on base when we moved here in 2011. And it was because the cable was too ridiculously high at the time. We lived on base. So I had Dish Network for our TV, regular, or, I guess cable TV. And then I had the antenna TV. And like you said, you had all these channels. Well, I'm in 2 mass markets where I'm at. I'm literally in between Baltimore and DC. So I had 40 plus channels.
Wow.
I had 2 ABCs. I had 2 NBCs. I had 2 CBSs, 2 Foxes, and you just keep on going. I had a music channel, which I didn't know existed outside of VH1 and MTV. There was a dedicated weather channel, but no one was on it. It was just a weather map. I'm like, that's cool. I like that. There was all types of stuff. Like you said, there was a few religious channels. There was Spanish channels. There was this and that. There was the Me TV. There was probably was Retro TV then, but all this other stuff. I had 2 PBSs, and then the PBSs had sub channels. They had the kids PBS or PBS Kids. So you just stick it on there when I was on base, it was just Adam. So I just stick it on there and let him watch World or whatever was on and just let it go. And you didn't have to worry about, crap, now it's the
Yeah.
HGTV time, or nope, now it's
Right.
the whatever PBS News.
It's like
So
getting Nickelodeon over the air, essentially.
that's it, and it was great. And then I
Yeah.
had it when we moved to this house a year after. I ditched um, the Dish Network. I had the TV or the antenna up, but we're just down enough that we can't pick up all of the DC channels. We can
Mm-hmm.
still pick up a lot of the Baltimore channels, but it depends on how I aim the antenna. I found that out, and this is one of those ones you stick, you actually mount outside the window, or outside the door
Oh
rather on
yeah.
the house. So I can pick up like our ABC, but I can't pick up Fox or vice versa. Whatever, I just point it the wrong differently. I'm like, geez, I'm back to freaking rabbit ears.
Yep.
So um, anyway, long story short, like I said, we've now come to the end. I disconnected that antenna. I was trying to rearrange it and make my life a little easier, and I just got lazy and haven't put it back up. Um, we most of everything is streamed now. If we want to watch even the local news, it's on some way somehow on TV on the like YouTube, or just dial it in on our phones. We watch it. We watch the president now. Well, this is really terrible. Back in the day, you couldn't stand to watch the president. Now all we do, especially with this current pandemic we have, that's all we do is watch the daily pandemic updates
Yeah.
on our phones now. That we watch it. So, but I mean that's a whole other
Yeah.
chapter in itself. The advancements in technology, that maybe that's what
Oh
we could
yeah.
talk about next time or some
Well,
other
yeah.
time.
Even that new Quibi service is just supposed to be no more than 10-minute episodes, so you can watch on your phone. I mean, they
Right.
don't even have it on Roku, or I don't think any of those platforms to watch it on a TV. It's all meant for your phone. So that's the era we live in now.
It
Do
is.
everything from your phone. Oh gosh, night and day from back in the day. You
That's
know.
exactly what it is. Night and day.
That's
Back when you had to have a TV, you had to have paper maps before GPSs. You had to have,
right.
your dial. Well, we
Everything
remember.
was tangible. Everything
Yes,
was not digital. There's no digital copy. It was on a cassette, VHS tape, or
regular cassette or what. We
record.
again
Yeah,
here we are going back to radio station just briefly, but you think this is 90. Well, when I started there, it was 93. And in 93, when Windows 3.1 was just coming online, and here we are in a radio station still using 8-track like carts, tapes to play your commercials. Sometimes well, at our station we didn't play songs, but we could. I did that at another station. You had reel-to-reel machines that played Paul Harvey or
right.
what other shows. We had music that was our fake automation. That's what Bob said at one point. Um, you still had the 45s there that we could still spin the records, not CDs. We had a CD player. If we took it from the FM studio, we could
Right.
play
Right.
CDs, but we still had all this older equipment that we were running a live. I say live because we were flipping the switches, but we were running this system before the computer that we talked about later on, the Digilink that we came to uh, um, came into place around 94,
Mm-hmm.
and everything fit on that box. And we're like, this is like amazing. We don't have to run the records or
Right.
50
Yeah.
carts during the football game. What is this?
Yeah.
Um,
Game changer.
it was a big game changer, and here we are. Everything now I mean, we could run our own radio station when we do from our own little phone.
Yeah.
You know, you pick up. I'm not even talking the commercial guys. I'm thinking of iHeart or what is it?
Pandora.
Pandera. Um, those guys. I mean, you just put your song list in and go, let it be, and it DJs, and you sit back and let the money come in.
That's right.
Um, so
Yeah.
anyway,
Different time.
different time. But I'm still trying to put my radio station together. I'm getting closer. I'm now making cables for my little pseudo radio station. Hopefully, God willing, and I can have something set up this summer, a mock, even if it's folding tables with the equipment set up, and I'll do a YouTube for you guys to see what kind of we had to
Great,
deal
man.
with. I don't know how I'll hook it up. I mean, as far as like, I need to make the carts legit, so they're not just blank carts, but I want to make the carts work. You know,
Yeah.
so you trip them, and there's a commercial, probably one of the commercials we have from WCPA, and whatever.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. All right. I think we covered our early TV memories there, and cable channels and everything.
Yep.
Um,
It is officially your turn now for.
okay. I had an idea since
Okay.
we're talking TV. Let's talk about some old TV commercials next time.
That could be fun. I know that's one of our. It was somewhere on our list.
It's on the list. It's on the list. So, yeah, just from the time when we were kids up through high school years. So, you can go back to early 80s up through like 94. Let's just pick out some commercials that we just love to watch for some reason, or some of those ones that we always saw, the 1-900 number commercials at late at night, and all the cereal commercials we got during Saturday morning cartoons. We can talk about some like that, some of our favorites during maybe specific times that we were watching TV, and maybe some of the ones that were the most annoying. Crazy Eddie, I don't know. I kind of found him entertaining more than I did annoying. But
same here.
Yeah, we can just talk about some of those old commercials that we remember in between our favorite shows, and some that made us want to get back to the show quicker, and some that we didn't mind so much. Maybe were animated. Oh, I think about like those old. Remember those old bubblegum commercials? I think maybe it was Bubble Yum or Bubblicious, where it was like split live action and animation. So the kids would be at school, they'd pop the gum in their mouth, and they become animated and start flying in the air. Oh man, I love those commercials. Stuff like that. That was
vague. I can't really remember that one.
Oh, I'm gonna have to look some of those up.
Yeah.
But some of those that mixed like live action. Some of the cereal commercials I remember mixed live action with the actual like cereal mascots. So Rice Krispies, I think, was one that did that with Snap, Crackle, and Pop. But yeah, let's go into some of our old commercials next time.
Sounds great.
All right. You want to take us out of here?
I am. So don't touch that dial. We're in stereo where available. Although you might need to adjust that dial, or possibly the vertical hold, you never need to move the rabbit ears as long as you're cabled in while we continue to run down a dream here on Memory Jogger.
That was good. In stereo, we're available. I remember that popping up on the screen. Yeah.
Yes, and we thought that was like mesmerizing. Wow, Kit is in stereo. So what?
Yeah.
Am I going to hear Michael on the left and Kit on the right?
I know. That was a big deal. Like I remember that being a big deal early MTV. Like the concerts in stereo. In stereo sound. Well, we never had a receiver and the huge speakers.
No, we didn't.
To hook up in stereo. We just used the speakers that was in our TV. We never went full on like that. But that was a big deal. That was like, the rich people or the people that wanted the true home entertainment system.
Yep.
Had the TV, had the receiver, had the speakers, and even your VHS player was hooked up to all that stuff. And yeah.
Now here's what I used to do. Me, the DJ guy, and this is, 06.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 06, because it was after another bad relationship. Had my own house. I would hook up my sound system, my DJ sound system, up to the TV VCR. Yes, I'm still dating myself. No, I had a DVD player then. I had the. That's what I wanted to try. I wanted to try my Dukes and Knight Rider on the sound system to see how better it would sound, because I had been toting around for years this 19-inch uh, tube TV, mono speaker, for years. That was my high school graduation present. We did not get rid of that until I met my wife here shortly before we were married. So '08, winter of '08. And I still was, to me, it wasn't broken, so no need to replace it.
Right.
But, the flat screens were just coming to be reasonable, especially at Black Friday, and that's how we got our first black flat screen. Um,
I
more by,
remember.
I'm sorry?
I was going to say, I'm laughing just because I remember our last tube TV. It was in this house. We bought I think it was a 27 inch. We had this huge like wardrobe
Yep, I remember.
armoire, and it would fit it perfectly. I think it was a 27 inch. We had it for the longest time, and this is as the digital TVs are coming out and the flat screens, and I'm getting more and more jealous and seeing how light some of these TVs are, and like, when is this thing gonna die? I mean, just die already. I mean, it's so freaking heavy, and I didn't want to, have to, if we ever move, I don't want to have to move it. And I remember the day it died, and I was like celebrating like it was my birthday. Sparks coming out the back. I remember like it was it was on the fritz. I'm like, yeah, burn, baby, burn. And Erin comes running out. She's like, what's the problem? What's going on? I'm like, the TV's dying. Yes, the TV's dying. And we went to a flat screen after that, and no more. I do have one we got from somebody just so I can hook up my NES and play Duck Hunt. That's the only reason why I have it. But yeah, so I remember that day and being so
See,
excited to get rid
I'm
of
the
that old tube
opposite.
TV.
I will make stuff last until it won't. My 19-inch, I did not want to get rid of it. I'm like, it still works. We don't have a need to get rid of it. We moved it into for a little bit, we moved it into my, it was just my wife and I, so we moved it into our spare bedroom, and it was supposed to be our guest room for whomever.
Mm-hmm.
And we ditched it because we were moving down here to Maryland. That's the only reason we were like, why do we need this thing? We don't need two TVs when we get down there. So we finally just ditched it. And I was a little heartbroken because I'm like, there's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
I'm a cheapskate. I don't want to buy it if I don't have to. That's where I come out.
Well, I'm kind of the same way, and that's why we still had that TV and never tried to upgrade. Even though I'm seeing all these great deals go by, and I'm thinking, okay, we could get rid of this TV, we could get rid of this huge, big armoire that we don't need, and find something a little more practical. But it still worked, so we stuck with it, and until it died.
I hear you.
Oh gosh, good times. All right, well, that was a little bonus
Content.
yeah, outtake, whatever you want to call it.
I was saying about the so you listeners can hear what I was getting at. So I listened to I have my sound system hooked up right at my
Oh yeah,
Knight Rider and the Dukes, and I'm like, wow, the General really sounds awesome. It has that throaty, almost glass packed sound on most of the jumps. I'm like, wow, the General never sounded so good. I knew it sounded good, but never really heard it sound good.
right.
Knight Rider, when the stereo came up, I had to hear it on the stereo, and I'm like, this is cool. It actually transitions on some of these. It's not great because they didn't think about it. I don't think at the time when they were editing it.
Yeah, but you're still getting some left to right stuff, and
yeah, you'd hear the transition.
Passing.
Like if you see like Kit driving down the road, they would at least make a slight transition as it's passing, right to left or left to right. You'd hear
Uh-huh.
it pass through the speakers. I got a newer mixer board here, '08. Yeah, '08. And it actually has a stereo inject knob on it, and you can play with it. So I had to, just because I had to hook it up to watch that again and see how it worked. Oh man, that was like night and day, because it actually made the stereo do whatever it needed to do. And man, you could hear the general jumping from right to left.
Oh man.
You could hear Kit going right to left clearly. It was so beautiful. I'm like, man, it's so much gear to have out in the living room, but this is so beautiful
Yeah.
to hear it
Yeah,
sound correct.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, I often wonder, just how much they've gotten better with the picture and the 4K and whatever the heck we're up to now, but I know the sound has come a long way as well, and I've just never been one to do that and hook up a true stereo surround system.
I
And
do, and because of that, to take it in, but I am so not wanting to, because of all we have the two, well, the 1 year olds now, and
yeah,
and they go to bed early. The 4 year old goes to bed early. Adam's the only one that has a late night sometimes with us, usually on a Friday
and you need a
night.
lot of soundproofing.
Oh, jeez, more than that. Yes. Heck, just before we got into the recording, my 1 year old son, who wakes up on a feather being dropped, he woke up 3 times in the time we were watching the Bumblebee movie,
Oh, wow.
and he will fall asleep once he's in your arms. He'll fall asleep within like 10 minutes. Then you move him back, and then it's a half an hour or so later, he cries like, "Where's everybody going? Why am I in the dark? Where?" I'm like, "Geez, come on, kid." It's not like my daughter. She wakes up and she's like, "Hi, how you doing? La 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 la. What's going on? This is cool. La 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 la." She's so happy. She don't care. La la la.
They interpret a little bit better. Yeah.
Anyway,
All right.
there's
Yep.
our trend. There's our long extended bonus material.
There you go. There you go. Thanks for listening to us over here on YouTube, and we'll catch you next time on Memory Jogger. Thanks for listening.
See ya.